This is Julie Pearson, Little Thunder. Today is September 29th, 2011, and I'm interviewing Brenda Kennedy Grummer for the Oklahoma Native Artist Project, sponsored by the Oklahoma Oral Histories Research Program at Oklahoma State University. Brenda, you're a citizen Potawatomi. You're perhaps best known for your paintings of powwow subjects, but you are a versatile artist who's been involved with Indian art for over 30 years. Thank you for taking the time to talk with me.
Thank you, Julie.
Where were you born and where did you grow up?
I was born in El Reno, Oklahoma, but I have always lived all my life on a farm west of Geary, Oklahoma. My mother was a school teacher, my father was the farmer and also a carpenter, but that's pretty much it for my upbringing as far as where I lived.
Did you have any experiences with art in primary or secondary school?
I was always interested in art, but I really didn't consider becoming a professional artist. I actually had planned to become a writer. I majored in English, journalism, and Spanish when I was at Southwestern Oklahoma State University. And I just gradually found that art was taking over my life. I didn't have formal studies at that time in college, anyway, in art at all. I'd had two that were just elective courses that I took in art, and I honestly can't say that we got a very big background training in art at that time.
Well, when you were a child, do you remember your dad drawing or anybody around the house? Did you like to draw?
Yes, I always drew things. I guess I taught myself to draw by copying pictures out of the big dictionary we had. You know, they had all those nice black and white little cuts, and I would copy them. And then I started on, probably copying just any kind of art that appealed to me. I think that's a really good way for somebody to learn initially, is to copy. You know, that's a long tradition of artists copying the great masterworks in the museums.
Do you remember when you saw your first piece of Indian art?
You know, I didn't have much exposure to Indian art until I was college age, and then after I got married, actually. My husband and his folks were always interested in Indian art, and my folks rather discouraged my promoting the Indian heritage. So I really didn't concentrate on that until that time, but I was always interested in it. And our farm at Geary was at one time a campground for the Cheyenne Arapaho tribes. And my mother, when she lived further on down the road, when she was younger, when my folks were both younger, right after they got married, they remember when the Indians actually camped on that site where the farm is now. We still find relics out there today with the metal detector. My husband found a little pistol, was dated 1932, a little toy pistol.
Yes.
That must have belonged to some of the children back then.
My goodness. Well, yeah, you're Potawatomi on your dad's side, correct?
Right.
So you didn't really go to any doings when you were younger?
No, I didn't, not at all.
But your dad did take you and enroll you.
Yes, yes. They decided that I wanted to be enrolled, and they weren't going to do that for a long time. But they suddenly they decided, well, maybe I had a right to be.
How old were you when?
Well, you're going to be counting up my age. I was married.
Married. You were already married.
Yes.
So he didn't enroll you when you were younger.
No,
This was something that you asked for when you were a young adult. Gotcha. You grew up in a part of Oklahoma where there was a lot of racism against Indians.
Absolutely.
And I'm just wondering what your memories of that.
Well, my memory is that I didn't really see all that much overt racism because I was sort of isolated living out on the farm, and I was pretty much, being an only child, pretty much by myself in the summers. But I remember on every Wednesday we would have a Merchants Trades Day at Geary. And that's when I really saw most of the Indians come into town, and I remember there were quite a few of them actually, and I remember the women sitting on the street in their very beautifully colored blankets, And yeah, I was always fascinated with Indian culture.
And your dad just really didn't speak about it when he...
Not too much, not too much. It was, at the time, as you say, there was rampant racism. And he just felt it was better not to explore that part of his heritage.
You met your husband at Southwestern. Was he, what was he studying?
He was a registered pharmacist. He graduated from Southwestern.
So he was studying, majoring in pharmacy.
Right.
You were interested in writing. And you were a really good student, I guess, because you graduated at 19.
Well,
How did you manage that?
Of me. Well, let's see. I skipped my senior year of high school. I went on. I took the last two courses that I liked from graduating. I took by correspondence from Southwestern. One of the professors there agreed to be sort of an advisor to me, and so I finished up there, and then I guess I just took a large class load. I went in every summer, and I usually took, I think, about 19 hours.
Yeah,
21
because
hours.
you didn't live on campus then or in town, or did you?
I did. I stayed over there. I had a room.
Tell me a little bit about your first jobs, which were in publicity, I guess, but none of them really involved any artwork at all.
No, it was just writing for the public relations office at Southwestern. I of course, worked on the school newspaper as well. We put out an annual every year, and in the summer, and more in the summer than any other time, we wrote feature articles about the different teachers around the state that were attending the summer classes. So I got a lot of good experience in that, and it was always exciting when one of the stories would be picked up by the United Press or Associated Press at the time.
Right. So were you also looking at art with Kenny? Were you guys starting to visit any museums or?
We visited any museum we could possibly find, yes.
And he knew of your talent for drawing and painting?
Oh, yes, yeah. Yeah, he was very encouraging.
So at some point you moved to Muskogee.
That was his first job as a pharmacist.
Okay. And you joined the Muskogee Art Guild. Do you remember approximately when that was?
It would have been in the 70s sometime.
There were a couple of, both Joan Hill and Joan Brown were in the Art Guild. I'm wondering if any of the other Indian women painters were in the guild at the time you were.
I don't believe so, not in the Art Guild.
Okay.
But I know they had an Indian women's club there at Muskogee called the Dakota Club, and I know they were in that.
Yes. Were you involved? Did you get involved with that at all?
I wasn't involved with the Dakota Club.
But they helped with the Five Tribes Museum.
Oh, yes, they did. Yeah. Absolutely.
So what kinds of instruction did you get at the Art Guild?
We had nationally known teachers come in to give workshops, and I think that was a big opportunity to have something right there in our hometown that we wouldn't have to pay to go hundreds of miles and have the expense of that. So I think the Muskogee Art Guild was very valuable to me.
What were some of the best workshops that you attended?
Well, one of my favorite people was an artist named Milford Zorns. He was a nationally known watercolorist, and he died within I think the last 2 years. He was in his 90s when he died. But I got well acquainted with him because at the time I was president of the Muskogee Art Guild, and we also had a juried show, and he judged that while he was there, and it was just interesting to hear of his many experiences because he has been so well known. Right.
What particular areas did that workshop help you with?
Well, I think always when I've gotten more out of workshops, I like to watch demonstrations by other people more than actually participate in the painting something of my own. I feel like I don't ever accomplish much on my own when I'm in a workshop. I just like to see what somebody else is doing.
And how they approach it.
Yeah, and he was an excellent teacher.
Did you win any awards at the Art Guild competitions?
We had a jury show, and I won the grand award.
That's wonderful. Do you remember what your painting was of?
It was of rocks. It was a landscape, a close-up of a lot of boulders and rocks.
Very realistic, kind
Yes.
of. You went to, would this have been your first Philbrook Annual Indian Art Show in 1974?
No, I think that was the last year they had the American Indian Annual. Maybe it was 1974.
I think they had it 79.
Was
up
it?
to 1979.
Well, I won the grand award at that competition the very last year they had it. I'm confused maybe on my dates there.
Yeah.
Because that was the very last show they had, and I never understood why that ended because it was so popular.
It was a wonderful show. Well, good. We'll come back to that in a minute. Let's go to maybe the first time you went to that show. Was it the first Indian art show you'd been to?
Yes, it was the first one I participated in. Let's see, I won a prize on a painting and also on a drawing there.
Wonderful.
So that really spurred me on, I think, about as much as anything, because I was a bit reluctant to compete at an Indian art show because I thought, well, maybe I wasn't really qualified.
Did you get to visit with any of the artists at that first show that you entered?
Yes, and I'm a little bit confused on the dates on when I talked to whom.
Sure. Who were some of the artists you?
Well, I remember Ruth Blaylock Jones. She's always been a favorite of mine. Went on to become the head of the department at Bacone College.
Right.
And let me see, I'm trying to think of somebody that stands out. Bert Seaburn was in the show, and I didn't really visit with him at the time, but I had read about his work.
Right.
And so I was happy to see them there.
What kinds of, what style were you using when you first entered? Were you trying that flat style?
I was experimenting with a little bit of everything, as I always had. One of those paintings was a painting with collage, totally abstract. And I remember the art critic of the Tulsa World, Maurice Davina at the time. I think he showed a picture of that in the Tulsa paper as one of the winning pieces, but I think he didn't really say as much, but I think he was implying that was a bunch of hocus pocus at the time.
Oh my goodness. So you got a lot of PR on that.
But then the other painting was extremely realistic, Al. It was totally opposite, so.
Yeah, there were a lot of strictures at that time, unofficial strictures, I guess, about what you could do and what you couldn't do as an Indian artist.
Right.
But definitely the abstract Indian painters were breaking out with these abstract styles. Did you start doing any particular research on, as you got into Indian subject matter a little bit more, were you exploring Plains subjects or Potawatomi subjects, or?
I'd say it was more sort of a compilation of many different tribes. There's so many intertribal powwows where it's not a powwow by just one tribe, but other tribes are invited. And I started going to the powwows at our Shawnee tribal powwow fields, grounds. And that's where I took many pictures. I also like to do photographs, so I got thousands of research photos there that I am still using to this day. Maybe 30 years later, I still have material that I use putting together for different paintings.
So that was your first time, you went with Kenny to the powwow at Potawatomi Nation powwow. Did you also go to the Colony powwow?
I didn't go to Colony powwow until several years later. Mm-hmm. I had to learn what all was available.
Sure.
Yeah, it was quite a bit after that. We moved back to Oklahoma City, and that's when I was able to go to more things in this region.
I see. Did your parents get to see some of your paintings with Indian subject matter?
Yes, they did.
And how?
Well, they came around. I had one person show at the Cheyenne Arapaho Museum at Anadarko, the Southern Plains Museum.
Oh,
not
Southern
Cheyenne
Plains
Arapaho,
Museum.
Southern
Great.
Plains Museum.
Great.
And my father was deceased at that time, but my mother came. She went several times. I know.
That's neat.
She was pleased anyway.
Yes, proud of you. When did you decide you weren't going to, I guess you were always working with a combination of styles, but when did you decide you were sort of going to go in a more realistic direction?
Well, I can't place it at any one particular time because I've always experimented with many different styles. Today, what I think is most me is a more impressionistic style, and I have decided to probably concentrate on that more than anything else because it's what appeals to me.
So one of the ways that you did your research, which again involved taking photographs, was that you would do road trips. Can you talk a little bit about those trips? Did you always pre-plan everything?
Well, no, I didn't always pre-plan everything. That doesn't sound like an artist too much, does it? Oh, actually, I did pre-plan to see where I could get the photographs that I thought would be most beneficial to me. But we almost always went to Santa Fe for Indian Market. I did not show at Indian Market, but I love to be out there, see all the other people and all the artwork, and that was the highlight of my year, was going to Santa Fe.
Going to Santa Fe.
Yes.
So did you and Kenny mainly just go to powwows? Was that the research, or did you sometimes go to different parks or places
mainly,
to take?
well, we traveled all over Oklahoma. We liked any kind of history, actually, and any kind of local color, and I like to see as much of our home state as possible. I feel like there's still a lot missing towns that I haven't been to. So I think anything that I can do to focus on Oklahoma history, well, I'm happy.
Did you ever do any on-site sketching, or?
I did more photographs. I did some sketching, but it was very sparse. Just maybe notations about different coloring and lighting. When
did you start dealing with galleries, approximately?
Let's see. My first gallery was with the Oklahoma Art Center. Imogene Mugg was a woman who owned the gallery at that time, and I enjoyed working with her. She asked me, I guess she had seen some of my work at different places and asked me to join, and I always thought that was a very fun, enjoyable show.
They had lots of people who would turn out for that.
Absolutely. Yes, that was my first place.
How many paintings typically would you put into that?
Oh, maybe 5.
Yeah,
every artist out there, and there were quite a few that were included too.
Yes,
so
a lot.
It was a full show.
How fun. And then you also dealt with Indian Territory Gallery, I guess.
Yes, I was at the Trail of Tears competition at Tahlequah one year, and I hadn't met Shirley Wells, the owner, before then, and she came over and she said one of my collectors had asked her why doesn't she get some paintings in by me. So she came and made my acquaintance. I was very flattered. So we worked with Shirley for as long as we possibly could. I was so sorry to lose her.
She asked for an exclusive on you, actually.
For a while. And she did a good job. I think she about worked me to death, though.
Is that
I
right?
think that was the only problem. She could get more things for me to do than what I could accomplish. So, yeah,
was
she was
it
a
in
wonderful
terms
person.
of just, getting paintings that she was turning so fast, or was it the...
Well, I'm not really a fast painter. I probably pick around on it too long, more than necessary. But I'm really not used to working rapidly, but I really admire the people who can. And she was very good about getting commissions for all kinds of things. She had got me on the cover of several phone books one year with one of my paintings.
Oh, neat.
So yeah, she.
Oklahoma phone books.
Right.
I think I remember that.
So she was a wonderful person and a wonderful gallery owner.
So you did do a number of commissions. That was an important part of your gallery work.
Yeah, and commissions are the thing that I least like to do because, like I say, I just go on and on and on, and I probably should have quit months before, but I'm constantly trying to improve it. It never satisfies me. So I'm not the best person to recommend for a commission, I wouldn't imagine.
Sometimes getting the business part of the art business is the most difficult, and I'm wondering, and it's kind of a two-person deal too. I don't know if Kenny handled a lot of that, or did you, or?
No, he didn't really handle the business part except to be a great helper to me. He encouraged me in everything.
I know. So when you were doing booth shows, you were selling originals. Was there a time when you were ready to get into prints, and how did you make that decision?
Well, for myself, I have never been that interested in making prints. I have made some, but I think it's really difficult to store them once you get them made. If you have a big inventory of anything, where do you put them?
Right.
So that's been one of my problems. But still, I would prefer to just do originals. You might not make near the money you would if you sold a lot of multiples. But I still think mainly I'll stick with originals.
So in the 80s, for example, booth shows weren't as important to you as the...
No, in fact, the only booth show I do is Red Earth, and I hadn't done it for several years, and I vowed that I would go back and do it this year if it killed me. And I didn't really have the inventory that I would like to have had, but I made myself go anyway because I like to support what we have locally.
Yes, and all the artists were glad to see you there too. And you had been involved in that show since it opened, Red Earth?
I don't think I was in it the first maybe 3 years, but then I was in it for a number of years. I've won a total of 8 medals there.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Well, and I was out for, I don't know how many years, a lot of years. I just didn't go. Ken was sick at that time, and so I missed.
Yeah, sure. What was your most important art award, do you think?
Well, I think some of the top awards that I have won at Red Earth and at the Trail of Tears were important to me. And let's see, I won a grand award at the Fort Smith, Arkansas Art Center's 6th state competition. That was a good award for me.
Was this in the 80s, or?
Yes,
Okay.
I can't remember the exact dates offhand right now.
Wow. So when you won your first grand award, how did that feel?
Well, that was really amazing. In fact, I guess that really was my most important award, was the grand award at the last Philbrook American Indian Artists Competition. That was a powwow scene. It was mainly material from our Potawatomi powwow, with other things interjected in there. But I believe that one meant the most to me.
Wonderful. How do you think the Indian art scene changed between the 80s and the 90s?
Well, I think a lot of the younger artists are more open to experimentation. They're doing a lot of subject matter that isn't all totally Indian. They feel free now that they can do whatever they want because they're an Indian artist. Doesn't mean everything they do has to be Indian paintings. I like to see the different styles coming out, but I like the old traditional also.
When you were looking through your scrap, getting ready to pick a dancer, or maybe a group of dancers, or a couple of spectators to focus on, what kinds of qualities do you look for that you think are going to make interesting subjects?
Well, I'm always interested in people's personality traits, their gestures of how they're sitting or not, And I think I'm interested more of Indians, about Indians as individuals rather than just being typical of being an Indians. You know, I find an individual personality excites me.
Well, Kate Osage, speaking of personalities, is one of your better known portraits, and she's kind of a legend around the Cheyenne Arapaho community. How did you come across her?
Well, that I said I didn't go to the colony powwows until more recent years, and she happened to be at the powwow at Colony, Oklahoma, and I took many pictures of her. I wish I could just keep painting her. She was such an interesting woman.
Did she get to see her portrait at all, or?
You know, I think that she died before she got to see it.
Mm-hmm. But she knew you were an artist.
Well, she didn't talk a whole lot. But, yes, she knew I was an artist, but we didn't have a great conversation much. But she was very happy to pose for me.
Have you done much judging of art shows?
Yes, I've done a lot of minor shows, and I had the honor of being one of the judges at Red Earth a few years ago, and that was fun. It's always interesting to see the varying opinions, and I really can't decide whether it's better to be an individual judge and where that judge, one person has that show that's sort of reflective of that one personal viewpoint, or whether it's better to have several. You know, sometimes if you have judging by committee, well, you finally sort of just give up and you take this one, I'll take that one.
And kind of let everybody sort of have their way.
Right.
Do you have any, do you remember kind of how the Indian art landscape then changed, like from the 90s to the 2000s, or
well,
does anything stand out?
Well, I'm trying to think of something original to say, but it's just changing in that the older artists aren't practicing as much. A lot of them are in bad health. We lost a lot of artists during the last 5 years. And I think we just have to wait and see what this new crop of artists do.
Of course, in 1990, the Indian Arts and Crafts Act was passed,
Right.
and requiring people to provide proof of citizenship or have a letter from the tribe. Do you remember how that impacted different galleries and individuals?
Well, I know some friends of mine could not prove they were actually enrolled, and that did change a lot of the artwork that some of them did. They couldn't enter those shows anymore. It didn't really impact me. I've been enrolled since 1974, and it didn't make that much difference in my artwork, to me anyway. I think it's probably good in many ways. I see a few drawbacks to it too.
How long have you been collecting works by other artists? I mean, some artists really do get the collecting bug too, or trading bug.
Well, I have been collecting it ever since I could afford to buy anything, I think.
In college?
Well, I couldn't afford to buy anything in college, so I didn't have it then, but I think one of our first paintings was Fred Beaver when we
that
lived
you
in
and Ken
Muskogee.
bought.
Yeah. I think it was $30, and so that was a lot of money at the time when we were first starting out.
Yeah, you've got some just really beautiful paintings
Well,
by a
thank
number
you.
of Indian artists here. So if you and Ken were both interested in something, did anybody's desires trump the other, or did you usually agree? Or
I'd say we usually had about the same taste in things. Yeah, he pretty much went down the line and did what I said. No, he actually was. His father collected some Indian pieces, so he's just always attuned to it.
Yeah. So, and I'm kind of thinking back to what you said about the fact that his family was always interested in both Indian art and Indian culture.
It was just more his father.
His father.
I thought his father just loved all kinds of Indian lore and memorabilia.
Yeah. So that was kind of another incentive or permission for you to start
Right,
exploring
mhm.
things. I'd like to talk a bit about your artistic practices, like water media are your preferred media. Can you talk?
Well, I started out, my first attempt at painting, I got a set at some oils in Muskogee, but they just didn't seem to suit my temperament. My temperament, I'm slow, but oils, you have to observe a lot of rules on painting thick over thin, et cetera, et cetera.
Wow.
And so I right away thought I'd try acrylics, and they seemed to suit me better than anything that I had tried. And lately, I have found some new acrylics that have been on the market for just a few years now. That they're acrylics, but you can spray water on them and redissolve them and keep working wet in wet. And there's all kinds of different mediums that help you get different effects, and I really see hopes for that for me.
Sounds really interesting. Did you work with alkyds at all? Am I remembering
Yes,
that right? And gouache?
Yes. In fact, before I discovered these new acrylics, for years I had been working in alkyds because they work a lot like acrylics, except you've got that open time. They usually dry. They're dry by the next day, and they're actually pretty dry within an hour.
Mm-hmm.
Where they're just sort of sticky.
Mm-hmm.
And I that would be my next favorite medium after these acrylics. It's sort of a toss-up between those two, I guess.
Have you ever tried any three-dimensional work at all?
No. I always have visions of grandeur, of trying everything, but I found that I actually need to concentrate more on my painting, because you could just start dabbling in everything all the time. I tried a pottery class out at the Oklahoma City Art Center just to do something different, and because a friend of mine wanted me to go with him.
Oh,
So, but I found that I love the pottery, but throwing that on a wheel or even hand building just doesn't work for me as well as other kinds of art would.
Right. When was this? Was this earlier in the 70s?
This was just in the last few years.
Oh, in the last few years. Wow.
Yeah, I just was trying something different.
Yes.
It didn't turn out to be what I was best at.
Some of my favorites, these are pieces that were done a while ago, but they have that black background, and it's used. It's kind of a vein of traditional art almost. I mean, Doc Tate really developed that, the figures against the black background. And of course, when you're working more realistically or impressionistically, the black is working differently. But I wonder if you can talk about what attracted you to the black.
Well, I've always liked black backgrounds. They make the design of a painting just stand out so much more, and they show off the colors that are in the painting. It's just a personal feeling. I don't know that you could say any reason why. It's just the drama,
right?
The colors,
right? A lot of your works during the 80s, I guess, had kind of a trademark would be you'd have this more realistically executed figure, and then you'd have kind of a penciled in outline of another different person next to them. Can you talk about what interested you about that juxtaposition?
Well, like you say, juxtaposition, it just emphasizes one figure over all the rest, and you have, maybe it gives a sort of a different feel, a more emotional feel, I think, just to have a light pencil line around and very, very muted features on the other figures.
Yeah. How important is story to your work, having some kind of storyline going?
I think it varies with each different piece. I think storyline would probably be one of my least favorite things that I believe in emphasizing. I like to emphasize emotion more than a particular story. I love some of the great illustrative painters that, for example, show out at the Cowboy Hall of Fame shows. They do fabulous work. But I think if I had to make a decision, I would pick the feeling of the painting over the story.
How did you come up with your signature? Sometimes that's a bit of a process.
Well, I've always wanted to have my own name in it. I like to be Brenda Kennedy. I decided, well, maybe I owed it to my husband to be Brenda Kennedy Grummer after we got married, but he always encouraged me to use my maiden name. So, in fact, in the last few years, I've been using Brenda Kennedy.
Oh, okay.
And that's probably what I will be using from now on.
Uh-huh.
So I'm not doing anything disrespectful to him because he was all for it.
Right. Right. What is your creative process typically from the time you come up with an idea?
Well, I usually start with sometimes I'll be lying in bed at night and I'll think of something that I've seen, something I want to portray, and then I'll get up and sketch it out, and then find reference materials that would go along with what I wanted to use. And I think sometimes I'm guilty of not drawing everything out like we're supposed to be doing and getting it all completely planned. Sometimes I change the painting midstream even. I work all over different places on a piece. I have one we were talking about earlier that it was a mother and child picture, but I got that all out and I didn't like the mother, so I blocked her out now, and I'm starting that again with a different pose on her.
So when you say you'll get up and sketch a piece, are you following through at night when you see that image in your head, or is it the next morning?
Yeah, it would be the next morning. No, I have to mull it over for a while. Sometimes when you go to sleep, then your solutions are presented to you.
What, when you look back on your career, what do you think was maybe a kind of fork in the road moment for you?
Well, I really think if there is such a thing as that one fork in the road, maybe it was winning that grand award at the last American Indian Artist show at Philbrook. That sort of cinched it for me that I was on the path anyway.
Right, you've chosen the right kind of art to explore. What's your creative routine nowadays? And I know you're kind of just, the last year or so getting back into shows, but when you can have that schedule, what do you?
Well, I like to start out early in the morning. I'm really more of a morning person than a night person. I've never been one that has really wanted to work into the late hours of the night. It's getting up. I might get up at 3 or 4 o'clock and
right.
start something and work on that. I just feel like I have more energy and more creativity in those morning hours. Sometimes, when you're getting ready for a show, sometimes you just have to work it all of it. But I'm a morning person, and I like to get started while I'm fresh.
Now, I know you've, done a lot of figurative work, but I'm wondering, I'm remembering too, I think, seeing, paintings with horses, or have you explored any animal imagery at all throughout your...
Yes, I have done some wildlife, and in fact, I'll probably be doing some more of that lately because I grew up in the country, and I like landscape and animals. I haven't done as much of that as the Indian things because, you get caught up in one type of a show. There's not enough hours in the day to do everything you'd want. But in this time, the last few years, I've been exploring more things like that. I'm very interested in doing more animal things, but more than that, even just landscape, just straight landscape.
Okay, yeah. And I know as my husband, there's always pressure from others, put somebody in that landscape.
Right,
But that can be interesting. So have you got some spots in mind or for your landscapes, or are you?
Well, sometimes I like landscapes that you don't ordinarily see painted, like in January, February. It's often a duller kind of a season, but then you can notice in the drier fields with the rusts and just muted. You know, you can sometimes get a more emotional feeling out of that than anything else. So I like barren things like that around Oklahoma, even around. I still have the old family farm out at Geary, and I like to go out there when I can and find scenes there. But other than that, I love New Mexico. I think all of us artists love Santa Fe. So I love the southwestern landscape, and I will be doing more of that, definitely.
That sounds neat. When you go back to the farm, then do you ever paint over there, or do you just go for the day?
You know, I usually just go for the day or the weekend. I haven't been working out at the farm very much lately. I actually don't stay out there much because of maybe security reasons. You know, it's out there. I'm isolated by myself, and in this day and time, you know, you can't be too cautious.
Right. When you look back on your career, what's been one of the highlights for you?
Well, I still say that grand award at the Philbrook was one of them. I've won other awards at different places in different states, but I still think that probably changed me more than anything.
That first one. Well, what's been one of the more difficult times for you?
I guess I've had a number of family members die, and you know, it makes me very emotional, and it's that's always hard. You can't get it back.
No.
Very quickly. It takes a while.
Right. Have you had a chance to do any teaching of art?
I have taught some workshops. Again, I'm not probably somebody would want to teach a workshop as much as I should be, because I could go into that perfectionist type of thing again, where I always would want all the steps of a painting. I like to have them done in advance, you know, and show all that so they can be ready to be photographed and in all the different stages. So I think I have not taught as much as what maybe I would like to, because it just takes me forever to prepare for it. I find I'm just better. I can give just a talk, an hour talk or something, but if I have to demonstrate a whole thing, well, I work better by myself.
Those talks are kind of scary, though, aren't they?
Well, they're always scary. Yeah.
Do you remember your first public talk?
I made some at Muskogee when I was with the Art Guild there. I even taught a workshop there later on. But I guess my first major talk, other than that, was at the Oklahoma Art Center at Imogene Muggs Gallery. She asked me to give a presentation one Sunday afternoon, and I did actually do more of a demonstration type thing there, but I still had a lot of those steps planned out and already done.
Well, is there anything that we've forgotten to talk about that you'd like to cover?
Well, I think we've pretty much covered it. I'm sure I'll think of something later on, but this has been a lot of fun.
We are going to take a look at your paintings here.
Okay.
So, like a photograph that you would take for scrap, except it's also just a beautiful piece of artwork in its own right. And where was this taken?
Well, this was also at our Potawatomi powwow many years ago. This man is deceased now, but when I take a photograph that stands on its own as a photograph, well, I like to just leave it as a photograph rather than try to paint it as a painting.
You don't even use it for... Yeah, that's a really neat, the angle and...
Oh, thank you. I just call that the man on the front row.
And that personality shines through. So here we're looking at like an earlier piece when you were more into your realistic style. And a young woman who I guess was the daughter of one of the artists.
Right, an artist who always comes to Red Earth, named Chin.
So we can see the realism here. You want to tell us a little bit about this piece?
Okay, this was a a recent painting done in the style that I'm using more now, an impressionistic style. It's done with acrylic, with that water dissolvable acrylic. I was speaking, well, all acrylic is water dissolvable, but this is the one where you can work on and on and on with it, sort of like an oil paint.
Right, right.
But this won an award at Red Earth this year, and I believe this is the type of thing that I will be concentrating on in the future. This style is something that I think it works more with, it just suits my temperament, I think.
Right, right. So the two war dancers contesting, and it really, you can see just how much it does resemble oil. It's really amazing when you get a close look at the texture.
Yes, it looks a lot like a pastel, actually, from the style I work in.
Does it have a lot of underpainting? Yeah.
Many
pastel,
layers.
You're right.
Yeah, I like a layered look. You can see what's underneath and just build it up till you get a very interesting surface texture.
Right. So this is one that's in process, but go ahead and tell us a little bit.
That's right. Well, this is a mother and child that I saw at Santa Fe Indian Market one year. That's probably 10, 15 years ago. And I had the mother drawn out, but I just didn't like the expression. There's something that just didn't work for me there. So as you see, I've painted white over where she was, and I'm going to develop a different figure for that particular spot. But this is layered in acrylic, but I put a coat of acrylic on, then I blot it with something like a newspaper or whatever you like to make a texture, then go over it with another color, so on. I like a lot of layering.
Right. It's going to be beautiful when it's done.
Thank you.
And you have a couple of pieces at the Potawatomi, at the Citizen Potawatomi Tribal Museum.
Yes, one of them was a large painting of a dollar bill with an Indian on it, and I called it Trade It to an Indian because I put it in a real gaudy, ornate frame, bright psychedelic type colors, and sort of little humorous sayings on it. They had mentioned they wanted to put it in the club or the casino, so I'm not sure where it's hanging right now, but then there's another powwow scene that I've done from over there.
So how does it feel, that's been a long road from getting enrolled to having a piece in your tribal museum. How does that feel?
It's always exciting. It's very it's a great honor when anybody wants to own a piece of your work.
Well, thank you so much for your time today, Brenda. I really appreciate talking to you.
Well, thank you, Julie.